The command ship hung above the colonial world of 442B like a metal fist. Inside the war room, General stood before a holographic display showing human settlement positions. Around him, 6 other officers watched the data with expressions that ranged from bored to amused. "They breathe slow," said Commander Vex, tapping a biological report. "Their hearts beat at 70 beats per minute, ours beat at 300. Their muscle response time is sluggish. Their movements lack coordination. This is not a war, this is pest control." The officers laughed. It was the sound of beings who had won every conflict they entered, who had never faced a real challenge, who believed their superiority was a physical law rather than an assumption. General smiled. He had conquered 17 worlds. He had never lost a battle. He had never even come close. They were faster, stronger, and more numerous. The humans had primitive weapons and a population barely large enough to defend their colony. This would take 3 days at most. "Begin the assault in 1 hour," ordered. "I want the human settlement surrounded by dawn. Any resistance will be crushed immediately." The officers dispersed to their stations. They moved with the quick, jerky motions that came naturally to them. Everything about them was speed. Their thoughts moved fast. Their bodies moved fast. Their decisions came fast. They had learned long ago that slowness was a sign of weakness. On the northern ridge of 442B, Hayes lay in the tall grass with her sniper rifle resting on a support log. She had been in this position since before sunrise. Her dark hair was pulled back tight. Her brown eyes were focused on the alien encampment below. Her breathing was slow and steady. Inhale for 5 counts, hold for 5 counts, exhale for 5 counts. "You're still doing that breathing thing?" asked from his position beside her, binoculars pressed to his face. He was her spotter, responsible for observing targets and calculating wind adjustments. He was also her friend, though sometimes he seemed unsure about the breathing. "Yes," said, the word came out calm and even. "It makes you look scared." "It makes me deadly. My grandmother taught me this when I was 9 years old." Had heard this before. His grandmother had been a combat medic in the old wars back on Earth. She had seen terrible things. She had learned that the people who survived were not the ones who panicked fastest. They were the ones who stayed calm when everything fell apart. "They are moving," said, shifting the binoculars. "Formation at 2 o'clock, looks like their command structure." Did not move, her breathing did not change, slow, steady, measured. In her mind, she was calculating. The wind came from the west at about 8 miles per hour. The distance to the command post was 2,300 meters. The general would need to move into the open to observe his forces. He would not be able to help himself. Victory felt too certain to require caution. Below, the army moved across the plains. There were 3,000 soldiers. There were tanks. There were weapons that could level buildings. Against them, the human settlement had perhaps 400 soldiers and defenses that looked like they had been built by people who still believed warfare followed rules. They did not believe in rules anymore. They believed in speed and power and the certainty that they would never be beaten. In the human command center, Colonel watched the approaching army on screens. His jaw was tight. He had been a soldier for 30 years. He had fought in 3 major conflicts. He had never seen anything like this. They moved with mechanical precision. There was no chaos in their advance, no mistakes, no hesitation. "Get me Hayes on the line," he said. The communication officer nodded and made the connection. Can you see them?" "Yes, sir," replied. Her voice was steady. "Are you ready?" "I am zeroing in, sir. Give me time." Did not fully understand what that meant, but he had learned to trust. She was not like other soldiers. She did not rush. She did not panic. She seemed to exist in a different time than everyone else, moving at her own pace, following a rhythm only she could hear. "You have 45 minutes before they reach the settlement perimeter," said. "I understand, sir." The communication ended. Continued to breathe, slow, steady. She was not thinking about the 3,000 soldiers. She was not thinking about the weapons or the power or the certainty in their movements. She was thinking about wind. She was thinking about distance. She was thinking about the exact moment when the general would move to his observation post, and how the light would hit his body at that moment, and how her finger would pull the trigger with exactly the same pressure every single time. "You're insane," said, but there was respect in his voice now. He had worked with long enough to understand. She was not slow, she was not afraid, she was the complete opposite. She was patient, and patience was something they had never learned. The army continued to advance. General stood in his command tent and watched the human settlement grow larger on his screens. He felt the familiar rush of satisfaction that always came before victory. His soldiers were ready. His weapons were superior. The humans would surrender or die. Either way, by tomorrow, this world would belong to the... He had no idea that a woman on a ridge 3 kilometers away was breathing slowly, calculating distances and angles and wind resistance, waiting for the exact moment to change the entire course of the battle. He had no idea because the Never looked for threats that moved slow. They could have not moved for 6 hours. Her legs were numb. Her shoulders ached. Her eyes were dry from not blinking. She did not move. She did not complain. She did not change her breathing. The general finally emerged from his tent. Immediately straightened. Target at 1 o'clock, moving to the observation ridge. Watched through her scope as the general walked across open ground. He was tall, almost 3 meters, with a chitinous exoskeleton that reflected the sunlight. He carried no weapon. He did not need one. His mere presence was supposed to intimidate. His confidence was supposed to paralyze the enemy with fear. Adjusted her aim slightly. Wind had picked up from the west. The distance was now 2,270 meters. The general would stop at the ridge in approximately 30 seconds. She breathed in, held, breathed out. The general stopped exactly where she knew he would stop. He stood with his arms crossed, looking down at the human settlement. His posture was relaxed. His soldiers were already at the perimeter, beginning to establish positions. The battle would start within minutes. His finger moved to the trigger. She did not squeeze it yet. She was waiting for the exact moment when a shift in the wind would occur, had briefed her on the weather patterns. A gust was supposed to come in 17 seconds. 17, 16, 15. The general turned slightly to speak to one of his officers. 14, 13, 12. Below the settlement, humans were running. They were setting up defensive positions. They were preparing for a battle they could not win. They had no idea that everything depended on a woman breathing slowly on a ridge. 11, 10, 9. The wind changed, felt it on her face. The grass around her bent slightly. 8, 7, 6. She squeezed the trigger. The shot came out of the barrel at 800 meters per second. It traveled 2,270 meters. It covered that distance in just over 2.5 seconds. The general never heard it coming. The bullet entered his chest and exited his back. He fell. For a moment, nothing happened. The soldiers on the ground did not immediately register what had occurred. Their general was supposed to be invincible. Their general was not supposed to fall. "She's zeroing in," whispered into the radio. The phrase was code. It meant had begun. It meant the calculated hunt was starting. Was already moving her aim to the next target. A colonel was shouting orders, trying to maintain control. She breathed. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The second shot fired. The colonel went down. Now they realized something was very wrong. They began scanning the area, looking for the source of the shots, but was 2 kilometers away. She was hidden in tall grass. She was a person made of patience. Commander Vex was in the command tent when the reports came in. General was dead. Colonel was dead. 3 other officers were down. Someone was shooting from a distance that should have been impossible. The advanced sensors were searching, but the grass on the ridge was obscuring the target. "Send a strike team," Vex ordered. "Find the sniper." The strike team moved fast. They moved the way they always moved, fast, aggressive, loud. Watch them coming. She had expected this. She had calculated the time it would take them to realize where she was shooting from. She had already selected her extraction route, was already moving the equipment. She fired 3 more shots. 3 more soldiers fell. Then she turned and moved away from her position, crawling through the grass, moving slow and steady while the strike team raced past her, searching for a sniper who was no longer there. In the command tent, Commander Vex was receiving more reports. Casualties were mounting. The officer commanding the northern flank was dead. The officer commanding the eastern position was wounded. The invasion force was starting to fall apart because it had no one to hold the center together. "How many snipers are out there?" Vex demanded. "Reports indicate 1 position," his aide replied. "Only 1 shooter." A single human had eliminated 6 senior officers in under 10 minutes. 1 human had killed 40 soldiers. 1 human was destroying the invasion. Vex looked at the data on his screen. The biological report on humans sat there, showing by the time the sun set, they had lost 73 soldiers and 12 officers. Their invasion force was no longer moving forward. They were moving backward. The human settlement was still standing. The defenses were still intact. The army, for the first time in recorded history, was losing a battle. Sat in the human command center, drinking water and eating food that she had not wanted. Around her, soldiers were talking in excited voices. They had watched a woman kill a general from 2 kilometers away. They had watched her dismantle a command structure with single shots fired from a hidden position. They had watched something that should have been impossible become real. Colonel approached her. He did not say anything. He simply placed his hand on her shoulder. That was enough. "They are regrouping," said, pointing at the screen showing the alien positions. "They are establishing a new command structure, but they are still confused. They do not understand what they are facing." "They will figure it out eventually," said. She was right. By the next morning, the commanders understood. They had realized that human snipers were the problem. They needed to find them. They needed to kill them. They needed to eliminate the precision weapons that were destroying their invasion. What they did not understand was that had spent the night training every human sniper in the settlement. She had taught them her breathing technique. She had taught them to be patient. She had taught them to measure and calculate rather than to rush and attack. When the assault began the next day, they sent soldiers forward in fast-moving groups, trying to overwhelm the settlement before the snipers could set up positions. But they had not counted on the fact that the snipers were already set up. They had been waiting since before dawn, breathing slow, calculating distances, preparing for this moment. 8 snipers fired simultaneously. 8 soldiers fell. The assault faltered. They tried again, this time with more soldiers, moving faster, covering more ground. 8 more snipers were waiting at a different position. 8 more soldiers fell. The invasion was no longer an invasion. It was a hunting exercise, and the humans were the hunters. Commander Vex watched his army dying. He watched soldiers panicking because they could not see their attackers. He watched the carefully planned attack dissolve into chaos. He had come to this world believing that they were the hunters. He was learning, too slowly, that he had made a terrible mistake. In the human settlement, people were cheering. Soldiers were celebrating. The invasion was failing. That was something that should have been impossible, and yet it was happening. Did not celebrate. She continued to breathe slow and steady. She had made a calculation. The order shocked everyone. The military had never retreated. They had never backed down. They had never admitted that they could not win. But Vex understood something that his general had not. They had already lost. The only question now was how many more soldiers would die before they accepted it. The fleet began to lift off. The soldiers on the ground were abandoned. They would find their own way off the planet, or they would stay and be captured. Vex did not care. He was thinking about his career. He was thinking about how to explain a failed invasion to the Council. His official report would say that the invasion was a tactical repositioning. It would say that the humans had used hidden weapons that had not been detected in advanced scans. It would say that under different circumstances, the invasion would have succeeded. It would say anything except the truth. It would say anything except that a single woman breathing slowly on a ridge had defeated the great army. Watch the fleet leave. She stood on the ridge where she had spent the last 4 days, and she watched the ships rise into the sky and disappear, stood beside her. Neither of them said anything. "You did it," finally said. "You actually did it." Did not respond. She was thinking about her grandmother. She was thinking about the lessons she had learned. She was thinking about how patience was not weakness, it was power. Colonel contacted her on the radio. "Stand down, the invasion is over. They are leaving." "Yes, sir," said. She lowered her rifle. That night, Human Command made contact with the fleet. They requested negotiations. They wanted to discuss the colonial dispute. They wanted to establish terms for a peaceful resolution. Commander Vex agreed to meet. He had no choice. He could not return to the Council and admit that he had been beaten by a single human sniper. But he could return and say that negotiations had been necessary. He could return and say that humans were more dangerous than previously thought. He could return and slowly, carefully rewrite the history of what had happened. The Council reconvened. Vex stood before them and explained what had occurred. He did not mention by name. He did not discuss breathing techniques or patience or the idea that they had fundamentally misunderstood human capability. He spoke in the language of military logistics and superior positioning and unexpected terrain advantages. But the Council understood the real message. Humanity had stopped the invasion. That was something that had never happened before. That was something that changed how the Council looked at humanity. Perhaps they began to think humans were not as inferior as they had believed. Perhaps there was more to this species than biology and genetic analysis could show. Perhaps it was dangerous to judge a people by their breathing rate and their muscle response time. 6 months after the invasion ended, Hayes received the highest military honor that the human government could grant. She was called to the capital. She wore a dress uniform. She stood in a great hall while hundreds of people watched. A medal was placed around her neck. People applauded. Did not smile. She did not seem happy or proud or satisfied. She simply stood there and accepted the honor the way she had accepted everything in her life, with steady breathing and a calm heart. But the greater honor came from an unexpected source. They sent a diplomatic envoy. They arrived not as invaders but as visitors. Their leader was a tall officer named who had survived the invasion. He had fought against the humans and he had seen how they fought. He had been impressed. The envoy delivered a formal request. The military academy wanted to study human combat techniques. They wanted to understand how humans achieved such precision with their slower bodies and weaker physiology. Most importantly, they wanted to learn the breathing technique that had allowed a single human to defeat an invasion force. Was asked to train a group of mixed human and soldiers. The first day was difficult. They could not understand why they needed to slow their breathing. Their bodies wanted to move fast. Their instincts told them that speed was strength, but was patient with them. She had learned patience from her grandmother. She taught them to breathe in for 5 counts, to hold for 5 counts, to breathe out for 5 counts. She taught them that control was more powerful than aggression. She taught them that precision was stronger than speed. Slowly, some of them began to understand. The ones who mastered the technique became incredible soldiers. They combined this natural strength with human patience and control. They became nearly invincible. Was one of the best students. He trained with for months. He learned her breathing technique. He learned her philosophy. He learned to think like she thought. A friendship developed between them. It was unusual. A human and a training together, learning from each other, becoming partners. But that was what the invasion had created. It had created respect. It had created understanding. It had created the possibility of something new. One day they stood on the same ridge where had taken her first shot. The grass was still tall. The wind still blew from the west. Everything looked the same, but everything was different. "Your grandmother was wise," said. "Yes," replied. "The council says that underestimating humans was their greatest mistake. They say that you have changed how they see the galaxy." Did not respond. She was looking out at the settlement below. She was thinking about the day when everything had depended on her breathing. She was thinking about how a simple thing, done perfectly, could change the world. Approached them, he was no longer her spotter. He was no longer her partner in battle, but he was still her friend. He looked at and standing together on the ridge, and he understood what had happened. The human who breathed slow had not just won a battle. She had won a war that went deeper than weapons and tactics. She had shown a species of fast-moving warriors that the real power in the universe came from control and patience and the will to never give up. Took one more deep breath, in for 5 counts, hold for 5 counts, out for 5 counts. Her heart was steady. Her hands were still. She was exactly where she was supposed to be. Below the ridge, human soldiers and soldiers trained together. They were not enemies anymore. They were something new. They were the future that slow breathing had made possible. The sniper who had mocked her breathing was dead. The general who had called humans slow had fallen to her shot. The council that had underestimated humanity had learned the hard way that respect cannot be measured by speed or strength. Respect has to be earned, and had earned it with every slow, steady, perfectly controlled breath she took. The story of the woman who breathed slowly would be told for generations. It would be told in human military academies and in command schools. It would be told as a reminder that the deadliest weapon in any arsenal is not a gun or a bomb or a ship. It is patience. It is control. It is the ability to stay calm when everything falls apart. And it starts with a single breath. Perhaps they had made a terrible mistake in ever challenging them. The invasion even started. She had known that if they attacked, they would attack with speed and confidence. She had known that they would underestimate human patience. She had known that a single person breathing slowly on a ridge could change the course of a battle. But the battle was not finished. They still had soldiers, they still had weapons. They would not give up simply because the initial assault had failed. Their slow breathing, their weak physiology, their supposed inferiority. He understood now that the data had been misunderstood. The slow breathing had not been weakness. It had been control. The weak physiology had not been a disadvantage. It had allowed for precision that the powerful, fast bodies could never achieve. The humans did not fight like they did not charge forward with overwhelming force. They thought, they planned, they were patient. And patience, Vex was learning too late, was far more dangerous than speed. Not see danger in patience. They could not understand that the deadliest hunter was sometimes the one who did not rush. His breathing continued. Slow, steady, constant, like a heartbeat, like a clock, like fate itself, counting down to the moment when everything would change. Below, the army marched toward the human settlement, confident in their victory, blind to the threat that was slowly, carefully, methodically zeroing in.